Now, to help us look towards that summit, we have with us Professor Song Se-ryun from Kyung Hee University. Professor, it's good to have you back on our show.
Good to be here.
Now, as we just heard in that report, there's a lot of expectation from these talks, but working-level talks only took place today. That's 4 days before the actual summit. There are some concerns have been expressed that over this short preparation time. Do you have any concerns yourself, Professor?
Well, it does look a little bit hurried, but I think that there is not much of a concern at this point because North Korea had their own national holidays in the meantime. And I look at the list of things to be resolved, and those are mostly logistical stuff. So I think that the intention to meet, the intention to hammer out something has been there on both sides. So I think it's a matter of just getting to the details, and probably we have enough time to do that in 3-4 day period.
What are some of those details that we can expect that they discussed today?
Well, some of the things would be the detailed schedule of the locations and where President Moon will have some sort of talks or some kind of event in the North Korea. And of course, the protocol and security issues and how many people will accompany as a delegate in there. I think there is a principal agreement that the size would be about 200 people from the South, including the businessmen and the politicians.
Those are very logistical concerns, but what about the more heavier stuff that they still need to hash out? For example, they want to try and talk about improving inter-Korean relations, but also, I think perhaps more importantly, President Moon has this agenda to try and become the mediator between North Korea and the US, and they need to talk about denuclearization. Do you think that kind of thing needs to be worked out first, or does the fact that this summit is over 3 days will mean there's plenty of time for them to talk about it there?
I think, as you mentioned, that's the meat of it. I think that the forum and venue and how they meet, that's the secondary stuff that they can hammer out in a short period of time. But the heavy issue of making some progress during this meeting is heavy on, I think, the President Moon's mind and also the leader Kim Jong-un's mind as well. I suspect the White House is looking at this thing as well. I think that the window of opportunity for making progress between the North Korea and the U.S. Is a great one for both parties, and to an extent it's kind of narrowing a little bit because of the domestic problems that Donald Trump has in the U.S. And also, if there's a midterm election coming up in the U.S., and if it does not be resolved to the satisfaction of Donald Trump, probably a lot of meanings could be lost. So, in a sense, that the best scenario that Kim Jong-un has at this point is to elevate these peace talks as a helping Donald Trump to be recast or regain the reputation that he intended as a peacemaker, the world peacemaker, and push that into a kind of a bargaining chip in this main talks. So if that were to happen, the progress has to be made in terms of defining what the denuclearization is, and also the logistical progress as to the subsequent North Korea-U.S. summit. So those things are probably still uncertain, and probably both leaders trying to hammer out and make some progress.
What do you think North Korea actually can try and get out of this meeting then? Obviously, you talked about what they want with the US, but they have this summit with South Korea first. What is their aim for this summit, do you think? What is their plan for this summit?
Being a mediator role in this process from President Moon Jae-in's point of view is to get both parties to a certain platform so that they can move forward. I think that's the reason why the South Korean government has proposed some mediated the roadmap. One is to have some sort of commitment from the North Korea, whether it be oral form or written form, about the nuclear inspection they have been resisting. I think that could lead to the declaration of the end of the war that both parties have talked about in ultimum, and that could lead to more detailed maybe a formation of the working group between the North and the U.S. to look at the issues more concrete manner, the term of the denuclearization and what kind of safety devices or the inspection schedules can be worked out. So I think that's a great move at this point, but I think what it depends on would be the kind of a negative move that has been formed in the U.S. about those intentions of the North Korea. And generally, Donald Trump is very preoccupied with the domestic quagmire that he is in. So whether we have something that is noticeable and commands attention from Donald Trump and the U.S. government, probably that would be the thing. The North Korea has been kind of hedging their bet in order to not to give too much in the negotiation. They have China as a kind of alternative, and they've been kind of smiling and stalling. But of course, the ultimate focus is not stalling. They want to make a progress, but in their own terms. So this is going to be a very delicate balancing act, a tightrope act. But I think the burden is there to make progress substantially, but at the same time to the satisfaction of all the parties.
So how does President Moon tackle this? What is his plan of action? How does he prepare for this kind of meeting?
I think that although this is a meeting between the North and South Summit, what is more important from the President Moon Jae-in's part is to have a close communication and coordination with the White House. Well, I think the same token, I think the North Korea would have a close relationship with China in terms of the progress. So I think there will be a lot of background or behind the screen actions to get the necessary parties in the same page. And that would be a greatest challenge, I think.
This is, of course, the third meeting between President Moon and Kim Jong-un. But actually, this time what's special is the fact that it'll be happening in Pyongyang in over 3 days. Now, this is only the third time that there's been this kind of meeting in Pyongyang. The first was obviously in 2000, the next one in 2007. Looking back at those, we can't help but look back at those inter-Korean summits as well. What do you think are some of the main differences, and do you think there will be certain similarities in the proceedings?
I think the similarities would be that both parties want to make the progress in terms of peace process. I think that North Korea would look at it as kind of an optics issue. If the President Moon Jae-in goes there, probably he'll fly in to the Pyongyang International Airport because of the road conditions that Kim Jong-un has mentioned. Probably he wants to be there. Kim wants to be there as a video would show that both are smiling and both are maybe kind of in a close embrace to show that they're together in this effort, and probably that'll assure the other parties that as long as North and South leaders are in locksteps, probably it'll make things easier in terms of ironing out the rough patches that are abound at this point. So that optics issue, but at the same time, probably there will be a lot of move to have the details ironed out, even in this short period of time. I think we saw the precursor of that by looking at the military side. The pre-summit meeting, they have had a very long meeting. I think when we say the devil is in the details, I think we're getting to that stage. The ultimate detail of this process, of course, militarily, would be those details they iron out in NLL issues and all those.
Let me get into that. So, for example, today there was yesterday, on Thursday, there was military working level talks, which started on Thursday, but they ended on Friday at 3 a.m. They were said to have gone on for 17 hours. I mean, the official line is that the talks were successful and everything went well, but 17 hours, that must mean there was some issues that they couldn't quite agree on quite easily. Perhaps this will go into what happens at the summit next week as well. I mean, what do you think? What do you think about this?
So far, I think it's positive because, like I mentioned, we have a broad agreement, but the devil is in the details. The details, when we're talking about the military matters and all those surveillance related issues, there are numerous things. I mean, I could see that 17 hours is probably not enough time to address all the issues at this point, unless that kind of difficulties in terms of getting to a quick resolution is used by the political leaders to say that, see, we cannot go forward because this is a deal-breaking matter. Until we hear that kind of noise from the political side, probably I would say that they're working hard. It doesn't matter how long it takes. Get it done. Mm.
One last development before we go that I'd like to cover is the US announced also on Thursday that they have slapped more sanctions on North Korea, and on entities related to North Korea anyway. They sanctioned 2 companies, one Chinese and one Russian, and they also sanctioned one North Korean individual who's supposedly related to cyber attacks that the US has suffered. Now, relations between the US and North Korea had been improving in recent weeks, but to suddenly have these sanctions sends quite a negative message, wouldn't you say?
Probably I'll have the same kind of attitude about this. U.S. has a hawkish factions and dovish actions on this issue, and there are departments working on the sanctions, and they have not formally stopped the sanctions. So in a way, you can look at it as they're doing their job. Until, and I guess what we will look for is whether Donald Trump or the leaders that leading the negotiation would say that, see, because of the provocations on the cyber side in North Korea, we have to stop this process, and we cannot trust North Korea because of this. If that becomes kind of the reason to stop it or stall it or put a significant roadblock on this, until that happens, probably I would say that they're just doing their job.
I guess they have to keep pressure on the North Korea. I guess it's a reminder that, to North Korea that that things aren't settled yet. That we still want denuclearization, and this is another poke up, reminding them that there's still sanctions on them. Would you say?
Very much so.
One more thing before we go. We've got a little bit of time left. The Joint Liaison Office was open today as well. What significance does that have between the relations between the 2 Koreas as well? Just briefly.
Well, the different forms of those kind of devices have existed. I think it's very positive because that means 24/7 they can iron out issues if they have to. But I think this is also a subordinate issue. This usefulness of this device is only good if it promotes the talk between the North and the U.S. and also continuing North-South relationships. It can go by the wayside very quickly if the political situation deteriorates. So I think it's a very impactful as long as the leaders keep the progressive point in their sight.
Well, that's what we have time for. Thank you for coming in today, and it's always great to have you back on the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.